Welcome back to the show, everybody. My name is Shane, and I'm here with Mark.
Hi.
And we are the Fantasy Football Pros. So today we have our final installment for Fantasy Football for Dummies by Dummies. This is part 4. This is our draft strategies. And before we get into that, if you are enjoying the show, please like or subscribe to our podcast. It helps out with the show. You can follow us on Twitter at the ProsFF and on Instagram at the Fantasy Football Pros for any extra content. You can also submit any questions via Twitter or at our website at www.thefantasyfootballpros.com.
Hey, Shane,
Yes,
are you
sir.
excited as I am about, we're only in some leagues 60 days away from drafts, maybe 65 days away from drafts?
We are, I think, 72 or 73 days from our draft.
Yeah, we're drafting like at the last minute, like ding, 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 ding. I can hear they're about to sing the national anthem as we're finishing up our league.
We are drafting 2 days before the NFL starts. Yeah.
I mean, you can hear the fat lady singing already, getting ready for the national anthem.
Actually, we can just start with that. You want to draft as late as possible.
And we're taking that to a whole nother level right there.
I'm just going to jump right in because people get injured during the preseason, and you want to avoid that so much. You don't want to have any busts before the season even starts. So if you draft extremely late, it definitely helps you out.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps out. You know, at that point, then you also know who's going to be starting, who's going to make the squad. All that type of stuff is all the last information that you need to fill out your team. There are so many different draft strategies, and it's just like an opinion. Or an asshole. Everybody's got one, right? But yeah, there are so many different draft strategies. The first one we're going to talk about, you will hear things about. I mean, I cannot believe this. That the other day at work, I'm talking with one of my co-managers at work, and we're talking, both getting real excited for the coming up on the fantasy football season, which for us has been starting all along. For how long now? Doing our notes and everything else. But he says, "Well, what do you think about zero running back strategy?" I damn near fell on the floor.
Yeah.
So for if you guys don't know what that is, that means where you do not take a running back until like the 5th or 6th round, and you load up on your quarterback, wide receivers. And I cannot believe he actually asked about this strategy. I thought it was like a unicorn. I thought it was like a myth that people actually thought about this.
So it is so difficult to land a running back, a good one, through that'll last you the entire season. And if you use this strategy, the running backs that you would be drafting on your team have very high risk of either not starting, or they have injury risk, or the talent is just not there. And your chances of hitting on that running back actually being viable for your team for the entire season is extremely low. And for you to get 2 of those to fill both your roster spots, you'd have to get so extremely lucky or have the best insider information for that to work.
I know you're gonna hear people say, "Well, look at last year. Look at all the top running backs getting hurt, and you didn't get to use them anyway. So why not use just draft wide receivers right away because they're more durable and everything else?" If you hear that, he's an ass bag.
So the whole theory of this is for 2 reasons. One being everyone drafts running backs early. So while everyone zigs, you zag, and then you load up on wide receiver, quarterback, tight end depth, and that way you're stronger at those positions while everybody else is weaker. The other reason is because running backs tend to get injured the most out of everybody else because they're always, pounding against the defensive line, and they get tackled the most. So they tend to get injured the most. Last year was COVID-19 season. There was no preseason games. So that caused a lot of injuries because people were not up to the NFL speed, and it mainly affected running backs dramatically. So please stay away from that idea. The next strategy that is out there, one that we do recommend is called the Vegas strategy.
And I don't know if it's actually called a Vegas strategy. It's just what I call it because we're using Vegas as a tool. And, I've never heard anybody call it Vegas strategy, but damn it, I'm going to call it Vegas strategy. So you can start looking now. You can start seeing prop bets out there on different websites, different companies that are out there that, your DraftKings, your FanDuels, your PointsBet, any of these type of things. You can start looking at prop bets for individuals, their season totals. So you can look to see what, for instance, Cam Akers is his season total projected by Vegas is going to be for yards and how many touchdowns he's going to have. So when you use this strategy is what you're doing is when you're evaluating your players, when you're putting your rankings together of how you would draft them, you're looking at what Vegas thinks what their average line should be. If you're using that tool, it's a great tool to have to rank your players and also to see during the draft, see when there is some value there. I love this strategy. I don't know if you've ever done this, Shane, but because I'm a golfer, and I do a pretty big money league used to do for the Masters tournament. It's a fantasy draft where you draft a team for the Masters, and I won it 2 out of 3 years by using this strategy, by using the Vegas tool, by looking at what the players' projections and the props bets were on these players. I think it's just a great way to go.
Yeah, Vegas does not like to lose money. In fact, Vegas never loses money. And that's why, because they put in their best prediction of what the outcome will be. And it might be different very slightly, but either way, they win money. So it's not as much of a strategy as it is like a really nice tool.
Yes.
That's absolutely free.
And think about this. Someone just built a $4.5 billion casino hotel. You don't do that by not being the smartest guy in the room. You know what I'm saying? You have to be. Vegas is the smartest guy in the room, and so if you follow Vegas, you're kind of following the right direction, in my humble opinion.
And next, we'll talk about fluid strategy. Now, we believe this is the best strategy. So no matter what your actual strategy is going into the draft, you have to be fluid, meaning, if let's say you're gung-ho about drafting a running back in the first round, but all the talented ones are all gone and you got like top tier wide receivers there, you should be fluid and change up your strategy and go for that wide receiver. Because if you're picking up that running back, you now have the worst running back, per the rankings compared to everybody else. And then when they come around and start drafting all the wide receivers, now you're getting the worst wide receiver. Might as well zig while everybody's zagging.
I agree. I definitely agree. Everybody's got a plan. It's like that. What they always said, a boxer, right? Always has a plan until he gets hit.
Till it gets hit, and it's all out the window.
Yeah. And this is what this strategy is. You have a plan of how you're going to draft, who you're going to draft, but then all of a sudden there's a run on running backs, or there's a run on wide receivers. All of a sudden you might have to change up. If there's a run on wide receivers, and you might have to change up your strategy and select one earlier than you would have, or a tight end. For instance, if there's a run on tight ends, and there's a group of tight ends that you want, well, all of a sudden there's a run of tight ends, and there's still one guy left that you like. Well, maybe you weren't planning on taking that tight end in the 7th round or 8th round, but now you have to. So you have to be fluid in your thoughts and your process, and not get so caught up on, well, this is how the draft's going to work. This is what I want. Pick the 2 running backs in the first round, then 2 wide receivers, and then you can't do that. You have to be fluid. The best plans you can have, it seldom works out that way. You seldom do you ever walk out of a draft saying, that's exactly how I thought it was going to happen.
That never happens. Or like in our league, quarterbacks score a ridiculous amount of points, and I tend to wait later in the draft. So I'll be like, okay, I'm going to wait till like round 9. But everyone in our league is drafting their backup quarterback before I even got my first quarterback. And now I'm seeing that pool dwindle dramatically. Now I'm forced to go ahead of when I wanted and draft a quarterback just so that I have somebody decent to play.
Yeah, that's just being fluid. That's all it is. All right. The other thing for draft strategies, you have to understand your league scoring system and positions. If you are in let's just put it this way, if you're in a super flex league, well, your draft strategy is going to be different than other people you listen to on the radio or listening to us, because that one, there's not a lot of super flex leagues out there, but they're out there. So if you join one of those, you have to realize what type of league you're in and the scoring system and the positions available. You want to make sure that if you're in a league that's quarterback heavy, as far as points go, where you're getting 6 points for a quarterback touchdown and you're getting points for yardage, well, your quarterback's going to be a little more valuable than maybe other positions. So you would have to draft them earlier. I'm not saying draft in the first round. I'm not saying draft in the second round, but you're going to draft earlier than maybe what we're saying, like in the 7th, 8th round. You're going to draft earlier than that. If your scoring system is where a quarterback gets more points, let's say they get 6 points for a rushing touchdown, but only 4 points for a passing touchdown, well, now you got to evaluate what type of quarterback you want. So you really, really, really have to understand your league scoring system and the positions that are available in that scoring, in that particular league.
Now we'll go into the draft. Now, drafting 3 down backs early. I find this to be very, very important. These guys are so hard to come by, and there's so very few of them in the NFL that this is why they're always drafted early. So you'll hear this saying is draft running backs early and often. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself, really not liking your team. So like we said earlier, the running backs, they get injured the most. So if you don't have these running backs on your team, and then, injuries start happening, and now your guy that was pretty decent, that was your RB1, now you're actually looking at like some trash players as your starters, and your team is hurting.
Yeah, now you're looking at Melvin Gordon. And nothing against Melvin Gordon, but if that's your number one running back, you are in trouble.
You want to make sure that you have plenty of running backs. If you've never played fantasy football before, you will soon learn halfway through the season that you did not draft enough running backs.
Yeah, without a doubt. I don't care how many you put on your team, you're still going to be going through them. Now, what Shane's saying with, you're getting 3 down running backs, and there's not a lot of them. There are exceptions to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, Derrick Henry is not a 3 down back. He's not. Okay, he is, because they keep giving the ball no matter how many yards he's still got left to get. So, but if you're thinking about someone who catches the ball, that's not Derrick Henry. That's not his game. But he's going to get so much yardage and touchdowns that you don't need those PPR stats, shall we say.
Yeah. It's like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor. Those guys don't need the reception work to still keep on pace with all the other 3 down backs. They are just exceptions to the rule. And Jonathan Taylor is the only one that actually has the upside of getting the receiving work, which is just like bonus.
He's shown he has got great hands. His catch percentage was ungodly last year. It's just they have Nyheim Hines there in Indy. That is got the same thing. He is just a fantastic run catching back. A pass catching back. But what we're saying is we still think that Taylor, we believe that he's going to start getting some more looks this year, that, he's going to get your points, rushing the ball, touchdown, the goal line, all that type of stuff. And he might because they want to keep him on the field. take some of those targets away from Hines had last year.
Mm-hmm. So there's a stat out there that the first 4 rounds of the draft, your risk at running back and wide receivers is extremely low that they'll bust or get injured. So those are your best options. That's your best time to draft those positions. Running back, wide receivers in the first 4 rounds, and running backs especially in the first 2 rounds. Which is why we are highly recommending in the very first 2 rounds, you go running back. There are going to be running backs in the middle rounds that you can take that will be startable, but they're not going to start off right away and be a starter for you, like in week 1.
What Shane is saying is like you really, really need those running backs early and often. That's when you're going to get the stud. That's when you're going to get your starters. You're not picking up bench players at this point. You're picking up the floor of what should we say of you're drafting the floor. Like that this is their floor. That in the first 2 rounds, if you're getting these running backs, you can kind of pencil in what their stats are going to be.
So yeah, again, draft plenty of running backs. We'll get into rookies and when to draft them, but start off with the 3 down backs, and then later on you can work on that.
So wide receivers, listen, you can start this in the 3rd round. You can start wide receivers in the 4th round. There are so many serviceable, good wide receivers in this draft that you don't necessarily have to take one in the 2nd round. You don't have to take one in the 1st round. And if you did take one in the 1st round, I'm going to tell you you're stupid. Plain and simple. That's when you want to get a running back. The wide receivers, there are so many that are all the same stats, the same guy. It doesn't look the same on the field, but when you look at the end of the day, at the end of that week, their scorings were the same. They scored the same amount of points. That's why we say for wide receivers, wait into the 3rd or 4th round. That's why we said you can take a tight end in the 3rd round if it's the right tight end and still not get a wide receiver until the 4th round. That there are so many serviceable, and I hate to say serviceable because that kind of says, they're okay. There are so many very good wide receivers that are out there that you really could wait to the 4th round if you wanted to start picking them up. Unless there's a certain situation which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, I would definitely be taking them, start taking them in the 3rd round.
Yeah, you can definitely, like in your 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, you could get wide receivers and they'll all be great.
Yeah. I mean, they're all starters. You're going to be able to get wide receivers that are number 1 receivers on their team through the 5th round.
And if you're wondering why there's so many wide receivers compared to running backs, it's that the main running back is the guy that you want. He's the guy that's scoring all the points. The backup guy is not doing much. He might, steal a touchdown or 2, get a little bit of work, but he's not getting nearly as much work as the number 1 guy compared to wide receivers. And, you can have 2 up to 4 wide receivers on the field at any given play. And even the wide receiver 2 on a team could outscore the wide receiver 1.
Yeah, it happens week in and week out where you see someone that is the number 2 receiver on his team. That doesn't mean anything. It's just when it's their week, it's their week.
Mm-hmm.
It's all matchups. The matchups are huge. Is this a slot receiver? Is it an outside receiver? They're going against a team that is horrible in the middle. Okay, the slot receiver is going to go off that week. I don't care if he's the number 2 or number 3 receiver on a team. That particular week, he's going to go off. That's why we keep saying, we'll say it again, draft your running backs early, and then you can start drafting your wide receivers after that because there are so many out there, but there's not that many running backs out there. Like I said, we know for the most part who the number 1 and number 2 are going to be. And you're going to try to have your team filled with. First of all, you're going to try to have your team with number 1 starters for their team as your wide receivers. The first 3 probably, but then that 4th wide receiver. Now all of a sudden we're getting into a little different area where it's they're going to go off on a certain week, and you just got to pay attention to when the matchups work for it. So you're doing the wide receivers middle rounds, the third, fourth, fifth round, but you're going to come back around and get more wide receivers later on. Because wide receivers, there's so many out there that you can get players that have an opportunity to have a great upside and score for you a lot in the later rounds.
Yeah, even dead last in the last round, you can still get talented wide receivers.
So, Shane, when do you draft QBs?
Interesting. So, if you are in a small league, let's say 10 players or less, you can only start one quarterback unless you're in a super flex league. And if you have, one of the top 3 quarterbacks in your league, you have what is called this positional advantage over everybody else. You're going to be outscoring everybody per week and it'll be more consistent. However, there are so many talented quarterbacks right now. I'd say this year more than ever that it seems like you could wait and load up on the rest of your roster.
I agree. I think that, like you said, there are so many talented quarterbacks. And if you're in a 10-team league, think about it. Each team's got one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league on their roster.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much difference in there between them all. Besides, let's say the top 3. Okay. Besides like the top 3. But you can certainly set yourself apart with a quarterback if you grab one of those top 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're using that in the third round to take Patrick Mahomes, you are really weakening the rest of your team, the rest of your lineup, because you went and got the number 1 throwing quarterback out there, right? Yeah, you're going to be having the best quarterback there, but you're weakening the rest of your team. So is it really worth it? That's the question. And it's funny, Shane and I, we were just joking about it today, because when we do these shows, we each put our own draft strategy together and then looked at it and compared and then decide what we're going to talk about. It really looked like we had one freaking brain.
Yeah, it was almost identical. I think we had a different round for when to draft a quarterback, and that was it.
I think I put looking at the 8th round was me.
I think you went 8, 9, and I went 7, 8, something like that.
So we're in the same area of when we're looking at this, but I'm really looking at 3 quarterbacks that I'm going to go with, that I'm looking at that I know I can get in the 9th round. I don't have to go to the 7th round. And that's just a different player evaluation that Shane has and that I have for different players.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still thinking the same thing. Do not select a quarterback early. It's not worth risking the rest of your team to get that quarterback.
Especially if you're in like a 12-team, 14-team league, if you draft that quarterback early, you're going to notice that the rest of your roster looks like barren. So you can draft a quarterback early. We're not saying don't do it. Absolutely not. Because, they're the most exciting name. It's the most familiar name. And I know some people, it's the first thing that they're thinking of. Like, I need to have one of those top quarterbacks. It's like, if you want to draft them early, you can. We're just saying, try to wait as long as possible.
Now, I really, really, really can't stress this enough. You should be going out there and doing mock drafts now, looking at it, test these different theories out, and do one. If you're thinking about doing a quarterback in the 3rd round, 4th, do it. Do it in a mock draft, though, to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're done with that mock draft, look at your team and really be able to look at the team honestly and say, how does my whole team look? And if you see a glaring hole in wide receivers or a glaring hole in tight end or a glaring hole in running backs because of that strategy, how you use that 3rd round pick on Patrick Mahomes or Russell Cook, if you look at it honestly and then do another mock draft where you don't do it, do what we're saying, wait to the 7th, 8th round. Okay. And then look at the teams honestly, compare them and see what overall your team strength looks like. you will see a difference.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely will.
We did this, and we know for a fact your team will look much, much better if you wait.
I mean, I did. I was off the other day from work, and it was raining. So what are you going to do? Well, I just did a whole lot of mock drafts, and I tried all these different strategies on where am I going to take the tight end, where am I going to take the quarterback, and I tried all these different things. And then when you sat down and looked at it, at the end of the day, the strategy we're talking about by not taking the quarterback until the 7th, 8th round, when I looked at the team, that was the best team.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, start looking around the 7th round. That's normally what I do during a draft. Is I let everybody draft the quarterback. I don't care, because I'm searching for running backs and wide receivers. And then once it hits 7th round, that's when I start taking a look at the quarterbacks, and then I start putting in my K the guys that I like.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put 3 or 4 guys up there. Then I will wait until I see that number start to dwindle. When I see that number start to dwindle, that means I got to make a move.
All right, so here's something else I do, Shane, and I don't know if you do this also. I have certain quarterbacks I'm looking at and thinking, yeah, that's probably where I'm going to end up landing or looking at that way. But depending how the draft went with my wide receivers, might change it a little bit where I'm like, okay, I was thinking Stafford and maybe backup of Cousins, but now I picked up Jefferson in the 3rd round as my starting wide receiver. I might go ahead and then at that point change which way I was leaning and go with a Cousins, so I can double up on points during a week when they're connecting with each other. I don't know if you ever do that or not.
I have, just because it's really tempting. If you have the top wide receiver and then you see, a really good quarterback, and you're like, oh, I could double up on points. Double up on points, what we're saying is the quarterback throws a touchdown pass to that wide receiver. You now just receive 2 touchdowns off of that 1 touchdown pass because both players got the touchdown. But the main argument against that is if they don't score any touchdowns, then you don't get any points at all. So I have done this move before, and I'm kind of against it, just because if they have a bad week, then you have a bad week.
Well, see, and I've done it I do it more often, to be honest with you, with my backup quarterback. That's how I tend to do it, is my backup quarterback, I will try to pair up with one of my receivers or this or that, because I'm not using them week to week. I'm going to use them when my starting quarterback is either on bye or injured, or it's just a matchup made in heaven some week for that offense that particular week. So I don't go into a draft looking at matching up my quarterback and wide receiver. I'm not going to draft my wide receivers that way, thinking, okay, I'm gonna draft this guy so I can draft that quarterback. I don't look at it that way. But as it starts falling into that 8th, 9th, 10th round, 11th round, when you're looking at that backup quarterback, yeah, then I'm looking to see maybe to match up my backup quarterback with one of my wide receivers to take, and hopefully that bye week that your starting quarterback is out, your guy does, hook up once or twice. Does that make better sense?
Yeah, I mean, it can, but it's not a tactic I like. It's just...
See, our one brain just split.
I mean, I do love yelling double points when that does happen.
Yeah.
It's really, really exciting because it's just one play. And now you just got 2 touchdowns, which, fantasy football is a lot of points, plus your yardage, plus, the receiving and the catch. So,
yeah, my wife's all like, what happened? What happened? Because I'll be down here going, motherfucker, yes. And she'll be like, what happened? What happened? Oh, my quarterback threw to my wide receiver. Do you understand how many points I just got?
yeah, it'd be like towards the end of a game and you're losing. You're like, okay, I need the quarterback to throw to my guy.
Yeah, exactly. It's classic when you start screaming at the TV. That's just nothing better on a Sunday than screaming at the TV.
All right, when to draft a tight end. There are three main tight ends in fantasy football right now. That being Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Darren Waller. Now, these guys have proven, at least for the last 2 seasons, that they are the main focal point on their offense. I guess Kelce, you can argue Kelce because he's got a really talented wide receiver out there, but there's so much volume out there. He just gets a ridiculous amount of work. These guys are just so consistent year in, year out. They're very, very safe picks. They score just as much as some of the most talented wide receivers in the game, just because of the volume that they're getting. Plus, they have higher upside on touchdowns.
They're really their team's number one receiver, but in a tight end position.
So you should grab them if you can, in the 3rd, 4th round. However, if they're not available anymore, you need to wait. And when I say wait, like wait. Unless there's a tight end that you really fancy, you can aim for that guy. But it just seems like there's those 3 tight ends, and then there's everybody else, and they're in their own tier together. So if they're all in their own tier together, who's to say who's going to be better than who?
Okay, so Shane, I'm just going to throw this at you. You're drafting at the end of the 1st round. Let's say you're a 12-team league, and you've got the 12th position. So you're going to get the 12th, and then turn around and get the next position. The first one in the 2nd round. Would you even consider? Because you see this happen all the time. You'll see it when you start doing the mock drafts, guys. You're going to see it happening. But what you're going to see is people taking Kelce in the end of the 1st round. That just happens. Do you believe in that or not?
Yes, just because as I was talking about quarterbacks, that positional advantage over everyone else in your league, it works more in a 10 to 18 league, just because you will have that positional advantage compared to 12 and 14 team leagues where everyone has holes in their roster. So your hole just wouldn't be at tight end, but it would be at like wide receiver.
And I know what you're saying with like an 8 or like a 10 team league, because there's that many more running backs still available in the 2nd round, in the 3rd round.
Mm-hmm.
Just it doesn't sound like much, but a 10 team league and a 12 team league is such a different roster.
Yeah.
You guys don't think it. I know you're out there thinking, nah, the old man has lost it.
Yeah, it's just 2 extra teams. It's dramatic because that's 2 players every single round that are no longer available for you. So by the time you're in the 5th round, that's 10 guys.
Yep.
That's a whole draft round for you that is no longer there.
Now, and again, this is where Shane and I wouldn't be surprised if Shane does this strategy. Like if he's selecting in the end of the 1st round and Kelce's still there taking him. I'm personally not going to do that. I'll wait. I'll wait for Waller or Kittle to fall into the 3rd round. And Kittle might not fall to the 3rd round. He might still be a 2nd round pick. Waller will be there in the 3rd round.
I'll be honest too. I don't think I would actually do this strategy unless it is Waller in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
Just because I like the way the roster looks. And we're in a 10-team league, so. But we will give you some tight ends to be targeting when we get closer into the draft, when we start seeing how the team layout looks. And we'll give you like 3 or 4 targets. And that way, just grab 2 of those guys later in the draft and, just hope that one of them hits. And if they do, you're set, you're golden. You got one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I've been playing around. I've been doing a lot of 12-team drafts, a lot of some 10-team drafts, just to see where players are falling. And I mean, just for instance, you can get the starting tight end for the Minnesota Vikings, who has got no competition whatsoever, all the way in the 13th round.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can really, so what we're trying to say is if you hold off, if you can't get one of those top 3 guys in the 3rd round, then you can hold off all the way to the 11th round, 12th round before you even pick up your tight end and still get a starting tight end in the NFL. And they're kind of all, for the most part, mix and match. One will do good one week, and then disappear for 3 weeks, and then they'll do good again the next week. And that's how they're all going to be in that position. So you're not losing ground to any other team in the league because of that.
And every year there is a new breakout tight end. All you got to do is get your hands on that guy. So either you're drafting him late because he's not going to be one of the early picks, or he's still in free agency and nobody drafted him. And you got to pounce on it once you see that, like, oh man, this guy just got 12 targets, 10 catches for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 1. Oh.
Yeah. Now Shane. Okay, so Shane likes this one guy that no other team will even look at. He's got his projection out there already for what he's been looking at for tight ends. He can wait to the very last pick of the draft and pick this guy up, and then hope what he's thinking and what he's watching is, I like what I see from this kid from college, or I like what I see in the preseason games, or in the in the camps. So he can still get. So he's going to select whatever tight end he wants earlier on. But then for that second tight end, he's going to wait all the way to the very end of the draft, possibly. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, it's literally like one of my tactics, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I go for the tight end, like starting around round 9, and then my backup tight end is just way, way late. Just hoping that guy hits. And if he doesn't hit, I just drop him.
Yeah, let's be real. So many people stream tight ends anyway.
Yeah.
They don't have a starting tight end on their team. They just go week to week for matchups. And that's another strategy you can do. You can wait to the very end to pick up a tight end and then just stream week to week.
So that is all we have time for you today. We are going to be coming out with our second part of draft strategies later on this week. So please tune in for that. We will see you all in a couple days. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon. See ya.